A lonely woman hears scratching at her back door on a stormy night, and when she looks outside, she freezes. A mother leopard, her 3 tiny cubs shivering at her feet, is begging to come inside. Against all reason, she opens the door. But what seems like madness hides something far more dangerous. Because outside in the darkness, something worse is waiting. The wolves are circling, and soon, she realized this night isn't just about survival. It's about a hidden truth that could destroy everything she thought she knew. Why would a predator plead for protection? What secret drove these enemies to her doorstep? And when the storm finally breaks, who will walk away alive? Before we dive in, drop your name or city in the comments. It reminds me that behind every view is a real heartbeat. The Montana wind howled like a wounded animal, rattling the windows of Clara Whitmore's farmhouse. She sat in her father's old armchair, a cold cup of tea forgotten on the side table, as she stared at the collection of framed photographs on the wall. Each one captured moments from a happier time: her daughter's graduation, family picnics, and nature shots from her work as a wildlife photographer. Now, they were just memories that echoed through the empty rooms. The grandfather clock in the hallway struck 9, its deep chimes mixing with the storm's fury. Clara pulled her wool cardigan tighter around her shoulders, feeling the familiar weight of loneliness settle over her. The Bitterroot Valley could be unforgiving on nights like these, when the wind seemed determined to strip the warmth from every corner of her home. A sudden scratching sound cut through the storm's rhythm. Clara sat up straight, her heart jumping into her throat. The noise came again, more urgent this time, accompanied by low, rumbling growls that definitely didn't belong to any local wildlife she knew. Her hands gripped the armchair's worn fabric as she slowly rose to her feet. The scratching moved to her back door, desperate and insistent. Clara's photographer's instincts warred with her common sense as she crept toward the kitchen. The motion sensor light outside had clicked on, casting harsh shadows through the window panes. What she saw made her stumble backward, her hand flying to her mouth to stifle a gasp. There, on her back porch, stood a creature that had no business being in Montana, a leopard, but not just any leopard. This one was clearly a mother, her golden coat dulled by hardship and marked with scars. Behind her, 3 small cubs huddled together, their tiny bodies shivering against the bitter cold. "This isn't possible," Clara whispered to herself, rubbing her eyes. But when she looked again, the impossible sight remained. The mother leopard's amber eyes met hers through the glass, and Clara felt something shift inside her chest. There was no aggression in that gaze, no wild threat. Instead, she saw a desperate plea, a mother's determination to protect her young. The recognition hit Clara like a physical blow. How many times had she worn that same expression during the tough years raising her daughter alone? How often had she faced the world with nothing but fierce maternal instinct driving her forward? Thunder cracked overhead, making the cubs press closer to their mother. One of them mewled pitifully, a sound that seemed to pierce straight through Clara's defenses. Her hand moved to the door handle almost of its own accord, but fear made her hesitate. "This is crazy," she muttered, her fingers trembling on the cold metal. "They're wild animals, dangerous predators." But even as the words left her mouth, she knew she was trying to talk herself out of what her heart had already decided. The mother leopard hadn't moved, hadn't tried to break in or show any aggression. She simply stood there, protecting her babies, waiting. Another flash of lightning illuminated the scene, and Clara saw how thin the big cat was, how her fur was matted from the rain and wind. Clara's own memories of desperation, of needing shelter, and help flooded back. Times when a kind word or an open door had meant the difference between hope and despair. Her grip tightened on the handle as she took a deep breath. "I must be out of my mind," she said softly, but there was no real doubt. left in her voice. With deliberate slowness, Clara turned the handle and pulled the door open. The wind immediately rushed in, carrying with it the scent of rain and wild things. The mother leopard didn't move at first, her eyes still locked with Clara's. There was an intelligence in that gaze that made Clara's breath catch. Then, with careful, measured steps, the big cat guided her cubs toward the door. They moved as a unit, the mother keeping herself between her babies and Clara as they crossed the threshold into the warmth of the kitchen dot as Clara slowly closed the door behind them. Shutting out the storm, she felt something else close too. The distance between her present solitude and her past role as a protector. Looking at the family of leopards now settling into a corner of her kitchen, Clara realized she had just opened more than just a door. She had opened her heart to something new, something that both terrified and exhilarated her. The mother leopard lay down, gathering her cubs close with one massive paw, but her eyes never left Clara. In that moment, an unspoken understanding passed between them, two mothers, two protectors, finding each other on a storm-dark night in Montana. Clara stood rooted in her kitchen, watching the leopard family huddle in the corner near her old wood stove. Water dripped from their matted fur onto the worn linoleum floor, creating small puddles that gleamed in the dim light. The mother leopard had positioned herself between Clara and her cubs, but there was no aggression in her posture, just watchful alertness. "This goes against everything I know," Clara whispered to herself, her hands trembling slightly as she gripped the edge of the counter. The big cat's eyes followed her movements, intelligent and steady. Despite her racing heart, Clara couldn't help but notice how the mother leopard kept one paw gentle yet protective around her cubs, who were still shivering from the cold. The crackle of her emergency radio made her jump. Sheriff Roland Pierce's voice cut through the tense silence, his tone sharp with authority. "Clara, come in. We've got reports of unusual predator activity in your area. Over." She reached for the radio with unsteady fingers, keeping her eyes on the leopards. "I'm here, Roland. Over." Listen carefully. Her brother-in-law's voice held that familiar note of condescension that had grown stronger since her husband's death. "If you encounter any large predators, do not hesitate. Either shoot them or drive them off your property immediately. They cannot be trusted. Over." Clara's throat tightened as she looked at the family seeking refuge in her kitchen. The cubs had begun to dry off, their spotted coats fluffing up in the warmth. One of them yawned, revealing tiny pink tongue and baby teeth that seemed more endearing than threatening. "Roland, she started, but cut herself off. How could she explain what was happening in her kitchen? He'd never understand. He'd never trusted her judgment, especially after she'd chosen to stay on the farm alone after his brother's death. Before she could formulate a response, an eerie sound cut through the storm outside, a long haunting howl that made the hair on the back of her neck stand up. The mother leopard's head snapped toward the window, her body tensing. The cubs pressed closer to their mother, making small, frightened sounds. More howls joined the first, creating a chilling chorus that seemed to surround the farmhouse. Clara's blood ran cold as she realized what was happening. Wolves, not just one or two, but what sounded like an entire pack. The radio crackled again. "Clara? Do you copy? Over." She watched as the mother leopard's ears flattened against her head, her eyes fixed on the windows with unmistakable fear. In that moment, everything clicked into place. The leopards hadn't come to her door as predators. They were running from something. They were prey. "I copy," she finally responded, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "Everything's fine here. I'll keep you posted. Over and out." She set the radio down before Roland could argue. Another howl, closer this time, made the windows rattle. Clara moved to peek through the curtains, and her breath caught in her throat. In the beam of her porch light, She could see several dark shapes moving through the rain. The wolves were massive, their wet fur making them look even more menacing. As they circled the house, the mother leopard made a low sound in her throat, drawing her cubs even closer. Clara recognized the fear in those amber eyes. It was the same fear she'd felt during those long nights after her husband's death. When the world had seemed full of shadows and threats, she moved away from the window and, surprising herself, sat down on the floor near the leopards, keeping a respectful distance. "We're safe in here," she said softly, though whether she was reassuring the animals or herself, she wasn't sure. "They can't get to us." Outside, the wolves continued their patrol, their howls mixing with the wind and rain. The farmhouse's sturdy walls suddenly felt like a fragile shell protecting them from the dangers lurking in the darkness. Clara's mind raced with questions. Where had these leopards come from? Why were they being hunted? But for now, those questions would have to wait. She watched as the cubs, despite the terror outside, began to drift off to sleep, secure in their mother's embrace. The big cat's eyes met Clara's again, and in that moment, they shared an understanding that transcended species. They were both survivors, both protectors, and for now, they needed each other. The wolves' howls grew closer, a reminder that the danger was far from over. Clara straightened her shoulders, feeling a familiar determination settle over her. She might not understand everything that was happening, but she knew one thing for certain. She had chosen to give these animals sanctuary, and she would honor that choice, no matter what stalked outside her doors. The first impact against. The front door made Clara jump. The sound of heavy bodies slamming into wood echoed through the farmhouse like thunder. Scratching and snarling filled the air as the wolves began their assault in earnest, testing every entrance for weakness. Clara's heart hammered in her chest as she ran to her bedroom. With trembling hands, she pulled her late husband's rifle from the gun safe. The familiar weight of it brought both comfort and painful memories. She hadn't touched it since that terrible day 2 years ago, but muscle memory took over as she checked the chamber and loaded it. Another crash shook the house, this time from the kitchen window. The sound of splintering wood sent her racing. Back down the hallway, the mother leopard was already there, her powerful body coiled and ready, teeth bared in a fearsome snarl. But to Clara's amazement, the big cat didn't face the window. Instead, she positioned herself between Clara and the threat, as if protecting her. The realization hit Clara like a physical blow. This magnificent creature wasn't just seeking shelter. She was offering alliance. They were in this fight together. A wolf's massive paw crashed through the boards over the window, sending splinters flying. Clara raised the rifle and fired a warning shot into the night. The boom of the gun mixed with the leopard's earth-shaking roar, creating a defensive chorus that momentarily drove the attackers back. But the wolves were relentless. They circled the house, throwing themselves against doors and windows with increasing fury. Their snarls seemed to come from everywhere at once, mixing with the howling wind and drumming rain. The cubs huddled behind an overturned chair, their small bodies pressed together. Eyes wide with terror. Clara moved from window to window, firing warning shots whenever the wolves got too close. Her arms ached from the rifle's kick, and sweat ran down her face despite the cold. The mother leopard matched her movements, adding her fearsome presence wherever needed. When a particularly large wolf managed to tear away enough boards to squeeze partway through a window, the leopard's massive paw struck out like lightning, sending the intruder tumbling back with a yelp of pain. But the defense was taking its toll. Clara's arms bore scratches from flying splinters, and she noticed the leopard favoring one leg where a wolf's claws had caught her. Exhaustion pulled at them both, yet they couldn't rest. The wolves seemed tireless in their assault. A tremendous crash from the back door made Clara spin around. The ancient wood had finally given way at one corner, creating a gap just large enough for a wolf to force its way through. She raised the rifle, but her trembling arms betrayed her. The shot went wide. The leopard was there in an instant, a roar so powerful it seemed to shake the very foundations of the house. She slammed her full weight against the door, pushing back against the wolf, trying to squeeze through. Clara recovered her stance and fired again, this time finding her mark. The wolf retreated with a pained howl dot for several tense minutes. Woman and leopard held their position at the damaged door. Clara's shoulders burned from holding the rifle ready, while the leopard's sides heaved with exertion. But together, they maintained their guard until the sounds of the wolves began to fade into the distance. Even after the last howl disappeared into the storm, they remained vigilant. Clara's fingers were cramped around the rifle stock, and she could see blood matting the leopard's fur where the wolf's claws had struck. The cubs slowly emerged from their hiding place, mewing softly as they pressed against their mother's legs. Clara looked around her home, now a battlefield. Claw marks scored the doors and window frames. Broken glass and splintered wood littered the floor. The storm still raged outside, but it seemed almost peaceful compared to the violence they had just endured. She slid down the wall, keeping the rifle across her lap, and met the leopard's gaze. Those intelligent eyes held a mixture of exhaustion and fierce determination that Clara felt in her own heart. For the first time since her husband's death, she didn't feel alone in her struggle. She had found an unlikely ally in this remarkable creature, forged in the heat of battle. The mother leopard limped over to check on her cubs, then settled near Clara, her powerful body still oriented toward the door. They had survived this first attack together, but both seemed to understand that their ordeal was far from over. The night stretched ahead of them, full of shadows and uncertain threats, but they would face them as they had faced the wolves united. The storm had barely begun to quiet when headlights cut through the darkness, sweeping across Clara's windows. She recognized the familiar rumble of police vehicles pulling up her long driveway. The mother leopard tensed beside her, a low growl building in her throat. "Easy now," Clara whispered, though her own heart was racing. She knew this confrontation was coming. The sharp rap of knuckles on the front door was followed by Roland's authoritative voice. "Clara, open up. We got reports of gunfire." Clara moved carefully to the door, keeping the rifle ready but pointed down. She opened it just enough to see Roland's face, illuminated by flashlights. Behind him stood two deputies, their hands hovering near their holsters. Roland's eyes widened at the sight of her. "Good Lord, Clara, you're bleeding." He pushed against the door, but she held firm. "I'm fine, Roland. Just some scratches from the wolves." "Wolves?" His gaze sharpened. "Let us in. We need to secure the scene." "I can't do that." Roland's face darkened as understanding dawned. The exotic animal reports were true, weren't they? You're harboring dangerous predators in there. They're not dangerous. They needed help. Clara's voice rose with emotion. "They fought beside me against the wolves. You should have seen it, Roland. The mother leopard protected me. Listen to yourself." Roland's familiar features twisted with frustration and what looked like pain. This is exactly the kind of reckless behavior that got Tom killed. Running off into the wilderness, taking unnecessary risks. The old accusation hit Clara like a physical blow. Don't you dare bring Tom into this. He believed in protecting wildlife and standing up for what's right. And look where that got him, Roland's voice cracked. Now you're doing the same thing, putting yourself in danger for some wild animals. That don't belong here. The deputies shifted uncomfortably behind him, witnesses to this family wound torn fresh. Inside, Clara could hear the leopard's quiet movements, keeping the cubs away from the door, but staying close enough to defend if needed. "These animals trust me," Clara said, fighting to keep her voice steady. "They came to me for help and I won't betray that trust." Not even for you, Roland. They're apex predators, Clara. They don't trust anyone. They're just waiting for an opportunity. I won't let you get yourself killed like Tom did. Is that what this is really about? Clara met his gaze directly. You couldn't control Tom's choices, and now you can't control mine? Roland's face flushed red. As sheriff, I have a duty to protect this community. Those animals are a threat to public safety. If you won't surrender them willingly, I'll come back with a court order. Then you do what you have to do, Clara replied, her voice steel hard despite her trembling hands. But I'm doing what's right. I know what I saw tonight. That leopard fought to protect me and her cubs. She's not a mindless killer. She's a mother trying to keep her family safe. This isn't over, Roland warned, jabbing a finger toward her. You're not thinking clearly, Clara. Grief has clouded your judgment. My judgment is just fine, Clara shot back. Maybe it's time you dealt with your own grief instead of trying to control everyone else's. Roland stepped back as if she'd struck him. For a moment, she saw the raw pain in his eyes, the same pain she'd lived with since Tom's death. But then his professional mask slammed back into place. I'll be back, he said flatly. Don't do anything foolish in the meantime. Clara watched them retreat to their vehicles, their taillights disappearing into the night. Only when they were gone did she allow herself to slide down against the closed door, her legs weak with tension. The mother leopard approached silently, her cubs trailing behind. She settled beside Clara, their shoulders almost touching. In the big cat's eyes, Clara saw the same fierce determination she felt in her own heart, the will to protect what mattered, no matter the cost. Well, Clara said softly, reaching out to gently touch the leopard's uninjured shoulder. I guess we're in this together now, aren't we? The leopard's rumbling purr seemed like agreement. Outside, the storm was finally breaking, but Clara knew their real challenges were just beginning. She had chosen her path, chosen to trust her instincts and her heart over family ties and conventional wisdom. There would be consequences, but sitting there with these remarkable creatures beside her, she knew she'd made the right choice. The first rays of morning light filtered through Clara's kitchen windows, casting long shadows across her worn wooden table. The storm had finally passed, leaving behind a heavy stillness broken only by the occasional drip of water from the gutters. Clara sat at the table, her hands wrapped around a steaming mug of coffee, while the mother leopard lay nearby, watching her cubs play with an old dish towel. This isn't right, Clara muttered, studying the deep scratches on her doorframe. Wolves didn't typically attack houses, and certainly not in such organized numbers. The behavior was completely unnatural. She winced as she stood, her muscles protesting from the night's battle. Making her way to Tom's old study, Clara pulled open the bottom drawer of his desk. Inside lay stacks of notebooks, their pages filled with his precise handwriting. Tom had been meticulous about documenting everything he observed in the valley. There has to be something here, she whispered, lifting out the most recent journals. The mother leopard had followed her, settling in the doorway as Clara began to read. Tom's last entries painted a troubling picture. He'd written about heated town meetings, disputes over logging rights in the northern section of the valley, local wildlife patterns disrupted, one note read, wolves displaced from traditional territories, corporate interests pushing too far into protected areas. Clara's heart quickened. She remembered Tom coming home agitated from those meetings, muttering about greed and short-sightedness. At the time, she'd been focused on her own photography work, not fully registering the significance of his concerns. The mother leopard made a soft sound, drawing Clara's attention. The big cat's shoulder bore several scratches from the wolf's attack. Clara retrieved a first aid kit and approached slowly, speaking in low, soothing tones. Easy now, she murmured, kneeling beside the leopard. "Let me help you with those wounds." To her amazement, the animal remained still as she carefully cleaned the scratches with antiseptic. Their eyes met, and Clara felt that same connection she'd experienced when first opening her door. A shared understanding between two beings fighting to protect what mattered to them. After tending to the leopard, Clara pulled on her boots and jacket. She needed to survey the damage from last night's attack. The mother leopard followed her outside, alert but calm, while the cubs watched from the window. The morning air was crisp and clean after the storm. Clara's trained eye immediately spotted the wolf tracks, dozens of them, circling her house in patterns that spoke of coordinated hunting behavior. But what truly troubled her was where the tracks led. They crisscrossed the eastern fields, an area where wolves had never ventured in all her years here. She followed the tracks to the edge of her property. In the distance, she could see the foothills where the disputed logging was taking place. Even from here, the scars of new access roads were visible on the landscape. They're being pushed out, Clara realized aloud. All of them, the wolves, and probably these leopards too. She turned to the big cat beside her. "Someone's disrupting the natural order, aren't they? And you're all paying the price." The leopard's tail twitched as she scanned the horizon, as if confirming Clara's suspicions. The morning sun illuminated her powerful frame, and Clara noticed more details about her appearance, subtle signs that this was no ordinary wild animal. Her coat pattern was unusual, and there was something almost refined about her movements. Back inside, Clara spread Tom's journals across the kitchen table. She began making notes, connecting dates and events. The timeline was clear. The unusual wildlife behavior had started shortly after the logging operations expanded. Tom had been investigating something that had made him increasingly uneasy in the weeks before his death. The sound of the cubs playing brought a small smile to Clara's face. Despite her growing concern, they tumbled over each other near their mother's feet, innocent to the larger forces at work. Clara watched them, feeling the weight of responsibility settling on her shoulders. These weren't just random predators seeking shelter. They were refugees, driven here by whatever was happening in the Northern Valley. She picked up one of Tom's last photographs, showing a pristine section of forest now marked for clearing. Her husband had died trying to protect this land and its inhabitants. Now, 2 years later, she found herself drawn into the same fight. But with even more at stake, the mother leopard pressed against her leg, rumbling softly. Clara reached down to stroke her head, marveling at how natural it felt now. "We'll figure this out," she promised quietly. "Whatever's happening, we'll face it together." Clara's fingers trembled as she spread the county records across her kitchen table. After hours at the local library and courthouse, she'd gather building permits, land surveys, and environmental impact reports. The pieces were starting to fit together like a disturbing puzzle. "Look at this," she muttered to herself, tracing a line on one of the maps. The mother leopard sat nearby, watching intently as Clara worked. All these parcels, bought up by shell companies, but they all lead back to one person, Travis Ellingsworth. She remembered the land baron from town meetings. Tall, imposing, always dressed like a rancher despite rarely working the land himself. He'd inherited vast holdings in the valley, but seemed determined to expand at any cost. The documentation revealed a pattern. Ellingsworth had been acquiring protected wilderness through various front companies, then pushing through rush logging permits with questionable environmental reviews. Clara's heart raced as she found Tom's signature on several documents as a local wildlife expert. He'd been asked to review some of the early proposals. "Oh, Tom," she whispered, touching his familiar handwriting. "You knew, didn't you? You were putting it all together." She found his last official report, dated just weeks before his death. He'd noted serious concerns about the logging's impact on wildlife corridors and denning sites. The margins were filled with his personal notes. Numbers don't add up. And who approved this? Most tellingly, E. Pushing too hard. Something wrong here. The mother leopard made a low sound, drawing Clara's attention to the window. Outside, the afternoon sun illuminated the scarred hillsides where new logging roads cut through once pristine forest. The truth hit her like a physical blow. Those roads had carved up traditional hunting territories, forcing predators into unfamiliar airs. The wolves weren't acting naturally aggressive. They were desperate, competing for ever-shrinking territory. Clara pulled out her phone, scrolling through news articles about unusual wildlife sightings across the region. Reports of predators appearing in unexpected places had spiked in the past year. And here, in her kitchen, was living proof: a mother leopard and cubs, far from where they should be. "That's why you're here," Clara said softly to the big cat. Ellingsworth's greed didn't just destroy trees. It destroyed your home too. She thought about Tom's increasing agitation in his final weeks, the late-night phone calls, the documents he'd started keeping in his locked desk drawer. He'd been close to exposing something bigger than just environmental concerns. The timing of his accident suddenly felt less coincidental. The cubs tumbled past her feet, playing with an old dish towel. Clara watched them, her resolve hardening. This wasn't just about protecting these animals anymore. It was about justice for the displaced wildlife, for the violated landscape, and for Tom. Her hand steady now, Clara began organizing the evidence. Property records showed how Ellingsworth had systematically acquired land through different companies, hiding his involvement. Environmental impact statements had been rushed through with obvious omissions. The logging permits themselves violated multiple regulations. "Travis Ellingsworth," she said, the name bitter in her mouth. "You thought nobody would connect the dots, but Tom did, didn't he? And now I have too." The mother leopard's presence felt different now. She wasn't just a refugee seeking shelter. She was living evidence of corruption. Her very existence here, proof of how greed had unbalanced the natural order. Clara understood with crushing clarity that her husband had died trying to protect this valley and its inhabitants. Now she faced the same fight with even higher stakes. She gathered the most damning documents into a folder, her photographer's eye noting which images and records told the clearest story. The truth had to come out, even if it meant making powerful enemies. Clara knew she was choosing a dangerous path, but looking at the leopard family taking shelter in her home, she knew she had no choice. The mother leopard pressed against her leg, as if sensing her determination. Clara knelt beside her, meeting those intelligent eyes. "We're in this together now," she said quietly. "What they did to you, what they probably did to Tom, none of it stays hidden anymore." Clara's fingers trembled as she pulled the dusty box from beneath the floorboards in Tom's old study. She discovered it purely by accident while trying to catch one of the leopard cubs that had wiggled its way under a loose board. Now, sitting cross-legged on the floor with the mother leopard watching from the doorway, she lifted out a stack of worn leather journals. "I never knew you kept these, Tom," she whispered, running her hand over the cracked spine of the topmost book. The mother leopard padded closer, her tail swishing with interest as Clara opened the first journal. Tom's familiar handwriting filled every page, precise and methodical. At first glance, they appeared to be standard wildlife observations, migration patterns, population counts, habitat surveys. But as Clara read deeper, she noticed something else threading through the entries. "April 15th, she read aloud. "Third clear-cut operation this month. These crews working at night now. No permits visible. Something's wrong with the numbers they're reporting." She grabbed another journal, this one more recent. July 3rd. Found mountain lion den abandoned. Cubs likely didn't survive. Area matches coordinates of E's next logging site. Preliminary survey already shows no endangered species. Who's signing off on these? The mother leopard settled beside her as Clara spread the journals across the floor. Her hand shook as she pieced together Tom's investigation. He documented everything. Coordinates of protected habitats that had been mysteriously rezoned. Photographs of illegal logging operations, lists of shell companies, all leading back to Travis Ellingsworth. "Look at this," Clara murmured, pulling out a folded map. Red marks crisscrossed the valley, each annotated with dates and notes. He was tracking the destruction. Every marked area shows where animals were forced to relocate. She glanced at the leopard. "Just like you." One of the cubs tumbled into the room, batting at loose papers. Clara barely noticed, too absorbed in a journal entry from just weeks before Tom's death. August 28th. Met with E today. Confronted him about falsified environmental reports. He laughed it off, offered to make it worth my while to look the other way. When I refused, his tone changed. Said I should think about my family's future. Not a threat, a promise. Clara's blood ran cold. She remembered that night. Tom had come home late, unusually quiet. He'd hugged her longer than normal before bed. 2 weeks later, his truck had gone off the mountain road on a clear day. "It wasn't an accident," she whispered, the truth settling, like lead in her stomach. "You were going to expose him, weren't you?" The mother leopard's tail brushed against her arm as Clara pulled out Tom's final journal. The last entry was dated the day before his death. Evidence compiled. Meeting with Forest Service tomorrow. E's entire operation built on fraud. Falsified permits, bought officials, destroyed protected habitats. Animals dying, ecosystems collapsing. Can't wait any longer. Whatever happens, the truth has to come out. Clara closed the journal, her grief transforming into something harder, more purposeful. The mother leopard pressed against her side, those intelligent eyes seeming to understand. Here was living proof of everything Tom had fought to protect. A magnificent predator and her cubs, driven from their home by the same corruption that had likely taken her husband's life. She gathered the journals carefully, stacking them with the maps and photographs. Tom had died trying to protect this valley and its wildlife. He'd recognized the deeper crime, not just the destruction of trees, but the systematic demolition of entire ecosystems for profit. He thought he was alone. "In this fight," Clara said softly, scratching behind the leopard's ears. "But he's not anymore. We'll finish what he started." The mother leopard rumbled in response, her cubs now playing with Tom's old bootlaces in the corner. Clara felt a fierce protectiveness wash over her, for these magnificent creatures, for Tom's memory, for the truth he died trying to reveal. She was no longer just a widow providing sanctuary to displaced animals. She was the keeper of Tom's legacy, the one person who could complete his mission. The evidence in these journals could bring down Ellingsworth's entire operation. More importantly, it could restore protection to the habitats he'd destroyed, ensuring other animals wouldn't face the same desperate situation as this leopard family. Clara squared her shoulders, feeling more focused than she had in the 2 years since Tom's death. The grief was still there, but it had crystallized into determination. She would protect these leopards, expose Ellingsworth's crimes, and honor Tom's sacrifice. It wouldn't bring him back, but it would ensure his death hadn't been in vain. The night air crackled with tension. Clara had just finished organizing Tom's journals when the first howl pierced the darkness. This time, it was closer, much closer. The mother leopard's head snapped up, her ears flattening against her skull. "They're back," Clara whispered, reaching for her rifle. The attack came without warning. A massive gray wolf crashed through the kitchen window in an explosion of glass and splintered wood. Before Clara could aim, 2 more wolves burst through the weakened back door, their eyes gleaming with unnatural fury. The mother leopard launched herself at the first wolf, her roar shaking the farmhouse walls. Clara fired a warning shot, but in the confined space, the sound was deafening. The cubs scattered, yowling in terror as wolves poured into the house. "Get back!" Clara screamed, swinging her rifle like a club when a wolf lunged too close. The beast's teeth snapped inches from her face, hot breath reeking of blood. She stumbled backward, tripping over an overturned chair. The leopard was a blur of spotted fury, fighting 3 wolves at once. Her claws raked across muzzles and shoulders, but the wolves pressed in relentlessly. Blood spattered the walls and floor as predator fought predator in Clara's kitchen. A high-pitched shriek cut through the chaos. Clara's heart stopped as she saw 2 wolves cornering the cubs near the fireplace. The smallest cub cowered behind its siblings, all 3 backing, away from snapping jaws. "No," Clara fired again, this time aiming true. The bullet caught one wolf in the shoulder, sending it yelping and limping away. The mother leopard heard her cubs' cries and fought with renewed desperation, but more wolves blocked her path. Clara reloaded with shaking hands. Blood trickled down her arm from where wolf claws had caught her. The farmhouse, her sanctuary for so many years, had become a battlefield. Picture frames lay shattered, furniture overturned, claw marks scoring deep into hardwood floors. A wolf seized one of the cubs by its scruff. The tiny leopard's terrified cry galvanized Clara. She swung the rifle hard, catching the wolf across its muzzle. The impact jarred her shoulders, but the wolf dropped the cub. The mother leopard used that moment to break free from her attackers, rushing to her cub's defense. Together, woman and leopard formed a barrier between the wolves and the young ones. Clara's rifle cracked again and again, while the leopard's claws found their marks. Gradually, the wolves began to retreat, leaving their wounded behind. The last wolf backed away slowly, lips still curled in a snarl. There was something wrong in its eyes, a desperate hunger that went beyond natural predatory instinct. Clara recognized that look. She'd seen it in men like Ellingsworth, who destroyed without thought for consequence. When silence finally fell, the farmhouse looked like a war zone. Broken glass crunched under Clara's feet as she checked each room, making sure no wolves remained. The mother leopard limped after her, still alert despite her injuries. Blood matted her beautiful spotted coat, but her cubs were safe. Huddled together under the dining room table, Clara sank to her knees, adrenaline giving way to exhaustion. Her arms shook as she set down the rifle. The leopard pressed against her side, offering warmth and solidarity. They had fought together, protected each other's lives. There was no going back from that dot, but Clara knew this reprieve was temporary. The wolves would return, driven by whatever force had displaced them. And behind it all was Ellingsworth, the man who had likely murdered her husband and was destroying the valley's delicate balance for profit. Dawn's first light crept through the broken windows. Clara forced herself to stand, wincing at her injuries. She needed help, real help, not Roland's misguided attempts to protect her. She needed someone who would listen, someone who could expose Ellingsworth's crimes before he silenced her like he had silenced Tom. Her hand shook as she reached for the radio. "This is Clara Whitmore," she broadcast on the emergency frequency. "I need immediate assistance at the old Whitmore farm. I have evidence of criminal activity involving Travis Ellingsworth. Multiple witnesses required." She paused, then added, "Please hurry. I don't think we'll survive another attack." The mother leopard watched her with those knowing eyes, understanding in her own way that their fates were now intertwined. Clara knelt beside her, checking her wounds. "We'll protect each other," she promised softly, "just like Tom tried to protect this valley." Outside, The sun rose over the Bitterroot Valley, revealing the extent of destruction. Wolf tracks crisscrossed her yard, and blood stained the morning frost. Clara knew Ellingsworth would come. Men like him couldn't risk exposure, but she wasn't alone anymore. She had the truth in Tom's journals, and an unlikely ally in this magnificent creature beside her. The crunch of tires on gravel broke the morning stillness. Clara's heart raced as she peered through a broken window. 3 black SUVs rolled up her driveway, kicking up dust in the pale dawn light. The Leopard tensed beside her, a low growl rumbling in her throat. Travis Ellingsworth stepped out first, his expensive boots incongruous against the blood-stained ground. 6 men followed him, all carrying rifles. They moved with military precision, spreading out to surround the farmhouse. "Miss Whitmore." Ellingsworth's voice carried false warmth. "I heard there was some trouble up here. Thought I'd check on you personally." Clara clutched Tom's journals to her chest, her fingers white-knuckled. Around the binding, the mother leopard herded her cubs behind the overturned couch, her tail lashing with agitation. "The house is surrounded, Clara." Ellingsworth's boots thudded on the porch steps. "Let's handle this reasonably. No one needs to get hurt." Clara's mind raced. The radio had gone silent after her call. Had anyone heard? Would help arrive in time? She backed away from the window as Ellingsworth's men took position. The front door splintered inward with a crash. 2 armed men burst through, rifles aimed at Clara's chest. The leopard snarled, but Clara gestured for her to stay back. The cubs whimpered from their hiding place. Ellingsworth entered last, brushing wood splinters from his jacket. His eyes were cold, despite his pleasant smile. "Those are quite the house guests you've got there, Clara. Dangerous animals. They'll have to be put down, of course, for public safety." "Like you put down my husband?" Clara's voice shook, but she lifted her chin defiantly. "For public safety?" Ellingsworth's smile faltered. "Tom's death was a tragic accident, just like yours is about to be." He nodded to his men. "The wolves came back. Poor Clara didn't stand a chance." "The evidence is already out," Clara said quickly, backing away. "I sent copies of Tom's research to federal authorities this morning. They know everything about your illegal logging operations." Ellingsworth paused, uncertainty flickering across his face. His men exchanged glances, their rifles wavering slightly. "She's bluffing," Ellingsworth snapped, but doubt had crept into his voice. The mother leopard chose that moment to strike. She launched herself at the nearest gunman with explosive force, her massive paws batting the rifle aside. The man screamed as her teeth found his shoulder, and chaos erupted. Gunshots rang out, but the leopard was already moving, a spotted blur of fury. She slammed into another man, sending him crashing through the already broken window. The remaining gunmen scattered, their training forgotten in the face of pure animal rage. Clara dove for cover as Ellingsworth raised his own weapon. But before he could fire, heavy footsteps thundered up the porch. "Drop it, Travis!" Roland's voice boomed through the doorway. He stood with his service weapon drawn, 2 deputies flanking him. His face was hard as stone as he took in the scene. "This isn't what it looks like, Sheriff," Ellingsworth said smoothly. "We were just trying to murder my sister-in-law." Roland's eyes blazed. "I heard everything on the radio. Followed you up here after you and your men rolled out of town." "The mother?" Leopard circled back to Clara's side, blood staining her muzzle. Her cubs peeked out from their hiding place, drawn by the sudden quiet. "You really think anyone will believe?" Ellingsworth started. "I believe her," Roland cut him off. "Tom tried to tell me something was wrong before he died. I didn't listen. Then I'm listening now." He stepped forward, handcuffs glinting. "Travis Ellingsworth, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder. environmental violations, and whatever else we dig up once we start looking properly. Clara watched as Roland cuffed Ellingsworth, her brother-in-law's movements precise and professional. His deputies rounded up the remaining gunmen, including the one the Leopard had mauled. The man would live, but he'd carry those scars forever. Mother Leopard pressed against Clara's leg, her enormous head reaching Clara's waist. Together they watched as Ellingsworth was led away, his expensive clothes dirty and his composure finally cracked. "Clara." Roland paused in the doorway. "I'm sorry. About everything." Clara nodded, her throat tight. The Leopard's warmth beside her felt like an anchor, keeping her steady in the aftermath of violence. They had protected each other, just as she'd promised. Just as Tom had tried to protect this valley, Roland's grip remained steady on his service weapon as he directed Ellingsworth into the back of his patrol car. The wealthy land baron's perfect composure had crumbled, replaced by barely contained rage as the handcuffs clicked shut around his wrists. "This isn't over," Ellingsworth snarled, but his threats rang hollow now. Clara watched from her battered porch as the deputies led away Ellingsworth's men, some nursing wounds from the Leopard's fierce defense. Emergency lights painted the pre-dawn landscape in alternating red and blue. The mother Leopard stood beside Clara, her golden eyes tracking every movement dot in the distance. A wolf's howl rose, but this time it was different. The sound carried defeat rather than menace. Without Ellingsworth's men driving them forward, the pack began to scatter. Their dark shapes melted away into the tree line, returning to whatever territory remained of their original hunting grounds. "We'll need statements," Roland said, approaching Clara carefully. The morning light revealed fresh lines in his face, as if the night's revelations had aged him. "About Tom's research, everything you found." Clara nodded. "It's all here." She patted the journals she still held close. Every illegal logging site, every violated protection law. Tom documented everything. I should have listened to him. Roland's voice cracked slightly. "To you. All this time, we both loved him," Clara said softly. "We just showed it differently." The sun began to peek over the eastern mountains, painting the sky in delicate pinks and golds. Clara felt the warmth on her face, realizing it was the first sunrise she'd truly noticed since Tom's death. The mother Leopard stirred beside her, and Clara knew what was coming. With careful steps, Clara descended from the porch. The Leopard followed, and her cubs emerged from the house to join them. Together, they walked to the edge of Clara's property, where wilderness began. The morning dew sparkled on the grass, and birds had begun their dawn chorus. The mother Leopard stopped, turning to face Clara. In those amber eyes, Clara saw reflected all they had endured together. The desperate night of first meeting, the brutal fights against the wolves, the final stand against human cruelty. But she also saw something else. Strength recognized and returned, a mutual understanding that transcended species. The cubs romped around their mother's legs, already showing more energy now that the danger had passed. The mother Leopard watched Clara for a long moment, her scarred face catching the morning light. Then, with fluid grace, she turned and led her family toward the tree line. Clara stood rooted, watching as the magnificent creatures disappeared into the wilderness. The cubs bounded after their mother, their spots flashing like dappled sunlight before they vanished entirely. Something in Clara's chest both ached and soared at their departure. She touched her own scratches from the night's battle, feeling the sting of torn skin. But the pain felt cleansing somehow, like the breaking of a fever. The grief that had wrapped around her heart for 2 years had transformed into something else. Not gone, but changed. Purpose had grown from pain. Turning back to her farmhouse, Clara saw it with new eyes. The broken windows and splintered door would need repair, but the damage felt like honorable scars now. This was no longer just the place where she had hidden from the world after Tom's death. It had become a sanctuary where truth prevailed, where courage found its feet, where loyalty proved stronger than fear. Roland waited on the porch, his face softened by understanding. "You going to be okay out here alone?" Clara smiled, feeling the warmth of the rising sun on her back. "I'm not alone anymore," she said. "I never really was." She climbed the steps to her home, each footfall sure and steady. The ghost that had haunted these rooms, both Tom's absence and her own grief, no longer held power over her. In their place stood something stronger, the knowledge that she had faced darkness, both animal and human, and emerged not just surviving but triumphant. Inside, Clara set Tom's journals on the kitchen table, where morning light streamed through the window. Their pages held truth that would ensure justice, not just for Tom, but for the land he had died trying to protect. She was no longer simply the widow keeping his memory alive. She had become what he had been, a guardian of this wild place, a voice for those who couldn't speak. The morning breeze carried the faint sound of a leopard's call from the distant hills, a farewell, perhaps, or a reminder. Clara smiled, feeling the echo of that wild spirit in her own heart. She had found her strength not in isolation, but in opening her door to the unexpected, in choosing compassion when fear would have been easier, in standing firm when others would have crumbled. The long night was over. Clara Whitmore stood in her sunlit kitchen, scarred but unbroken, no longer haunted by the past, but facing forward into a future she had helped shape through courage and truth. If you believe stories can heal, lift, and connect us, this channel is for you. Thanks for being here. Hit subscribe, and I'll meet you again tomorrow with something real.